Hey, everybody, welcome to the Multipliers Leadership Podcast. We are so excited that you're here today because this is our very first podcast, and you chose to jump in here with us. Today, our guest is Josh Foliart. Man, we're excited to have him on the podcast with us today. We're going to learn a lot about him, but let's just jump in right out of the gate and start. Man, Josh, welcome. How are you today?
I am well, Joseph. If I can match your energy, I
Oh,
love it.
goodness.
I love it. You
No,
are you are awesome, man. You're such a gift to me, to our organization, and those who know Multiply know that we're on a team together. And this is just so much fun to kind of get outside of our day to day
yeah.
and get on top of the organization and just talk about what God's doing. Right?
Oh, come on, man! You're speaking my language, and Josh. I mean, you and I we go way back, and so there's a lot that we've been able to do together. But what
Yeah.
I do know about you is that, man, you've been in a lot of different environments. You've led in and through a lot of different experiences. But what I really want you to share with the viewers now or the listeners now is, man, what's your time and energy? What's it focused on now? Just to kind
Yeah.
of catch people up.
Great question. Focus is a struggle for me, Joseph, as you know. And but
Yeah.
no, I think throughout my career, I've definitely taken a non-linear path, and some of that has been my own just wanderlusts, but some of that's been God as well, leading
Mm,
me on a path that I don't know that wisdom is always apparent on the front end; it's always on the back end
of course.
that you start to see wisdom. Jesus said, "Wisdom is known by her children." Right.
Hmm.
But really, I'm 43 now, and I'm certainly trying to focus my life in a way that's more and more useful to the King and the kingdom.
Mm,
And so, really, the two things my heart and my life is focused on in this season is executive coaching, working with leaders who are in places of influence and who have a heart for the kingdom, and they want to leverage their life
mm.
for the King, for the kingdom, and coming alongside of them, getting in their corner, and being a an ear for them, being a counselor for them, and
Mm,
that's been such a joy for me to get in the corner of coaches and former athletes and executives, and just we fight together. We get
yeah.
clarity, and we fight together on
Mm,
things that matter to them, to us, to the King and the kingdom. So that's one thing, and not uh, also, but kind of right alongside of that is Multiply Global, and that has been such a passion project of my heart that really was birthed in 2001. It was breathed on again in
mm.
2007, and then I finally got the courage to say yes in 2012.
Whew.
So
Takes
everything's
time.
a process.
Yeah.
Yeah, God doesn't deal with me in years. We go decades. So, um, but
Long time.
Multiply Global focused on identifying and recruiting these uncommon global leaders, these men and women throughout the planet who
Mm,
just need somebody to come alongside of them and encourage them and connect them to um, relationships and resources. And that's really where
mm,
we land. Like, how do we connect these uncommon global leaders to relationships and resources that are going to help them multiply the Great Commandment and the Great Commission?
mm.
And so I've given my life to those two things in various capacities. So trying to stay focused,
Uh,
and it's one
uh,
day at a time.
yeah. I think there's a lot of our listeners that can relate of, man, there's a lot of things they want to do, but what's the right
Yeah.
thing to do? And it sounds like you are on the journey along with this. And really,
Yeah.
Josh, I want to dig in a little bit more, as I listen to you, both in the executive coaching side where you're in a lot of different environments, a lot of different people, but also even on the global scale, on the global side, talking about relationships and resources being in front
hmm
of that many leaders, what is it that you find is common or true really within all of those? What is it they all need as you listen to them? What like how would you characterize them based on your experiences?
Oh, that's such a great question. I would say one of the things that I'm discovering about these leaders with crazy ambition and big dreams, and I love those guys. I love
Hmm.
head coaches. I love executives. I love coming alongside of those kind of guys. And I think one of the things that they have in common is just their deep love for their family and
Mm.
their children, and the desire to mark out a legacy and a path that's well worn, that their sons and daughters and wives and those grandkids, great grandkids
Hmm.
can see, man, this man's life was a story worth telling, and a
Mm.
journey worth emulating. So they all have that in common. All of them want to do well for their kids.
Oh,
I know
that's
that's,
such a good That's
yeah,
such a good answer. I think that's definitely something all of us want in any category.
yeah,
So I think that's great insight on that side. But um, I think for each of us, as we're trying to figure out what's the right thing to do, there's several
yeah.
of us that we have a passion or a passion project, as you called it, to start
Hmm.
something new, to step into a new space, into maybe even the unknown. I mean, what was it like to start a brand new organization and maybe even just, yeah, what was it like to start a brand new organization? Let's just start there.
It's not fun, Joseph.
This is supposed
It's
to be
not
an
fun.
encouraging podcast. Hey, but this
Yeah,
is
no,
how
it
it's
it
real
it,
though.
it
Hey,
it
talk to us about
is,
that.
but it, very little of what God calls us to is convenient, right? I've heard
Ooh,
that convenience is the enemy of character, and vice versa. And I think God calls us into hard places so that He can show up. And I don't want to over spiritualize it, because it is hard work. It's
yep.
business knowledge. It's understanding. It's networking. It's fundraising. It's all of the above, and that can take different expressions in nonprofit, for profit.
Hmm.
But I would say, to the guy out there, the gal out there who is um, kind of considering, or they've taken their first step, but they're in their first, 2 to 3 years of the enterprise, or the organization, or the nonprofit, or even the project, right?
Yeah.
I would say, and I've used this phrase, and you've heard me say this, but your connection is the key to new capacity. So
Mm.
if you are connected to the right people, the right network, man, your capacity just it becomes so much greater when you're around the right people, thinking the same way, going after the
Oh,
same things. And I would say one of the biggest issues for those kinds of people, and I would say all the way up into the C-suite, executive level, or into the head coach level, most high performing leaders and people that we would call multipliers of the kingdom,
yeah.
most of them are grossly disconnected
Hmm.
from real friendships or relationships and people that can help sustain and maintain um, what they're trying to accomplish. Most of them have plenty of talent,
Yeah.
plenty of competency. What they don't have enough of is connection.
Mm. So I think you're going to hit the nail right on the head with many of our listeners that, I mean, there's a deficiency or a gap on the connection
Yeah,
side. So what do you say to that person that they're like, I resonate with that? How do I increase my connection with other people or the right minded people? What does that look like?
yeah. Well, I think it seems really hard. It seems like they're not out there.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, the idea of, when the student is ready, the teacher appears is
Mm.
true. And I think sometimes when we get hungry enough, like, then most of the time it's us that prohibits or inhibits our connection. It's our own fear of vulnerability, or it's our own
Mm.
um, oversized um, uh, measure of our own importance in an
Oh,
organization,
okay.
right? And so we end up isolating ourselves because we think we've got to get this done. We've got to, and we don't prioritize connection. We don't prioritize, and here's the word: real friendship. Like, real friendship, like deep friendship. Like
Mm,
friendship is so powerful. And I remember in my early 30s, I had very little value for friendship and high value for achievement.
mm,
And there's nothing wrong with achievement. I think achievement's so important, but I think you can achieve and conquer, if you will, and take ground. But man, what's going to help you hold that ground is over
mm.
here. And it's
Whew.
these connections, it's the friendship. And if they're not at that same level, I mean, you're in a dangerous place up there all by
Mm,
yourself on top of this mountain. The air is thin. You fought to get there. And that is the leader's journey.
mm.
So,
I think that is an incredible picture for us of being able to look at both, because we all have the desire to achieve in some capacity. Even if you're like, I'm not a driven person,
yeah,
you still want to
right.
achieve something, right?
Yeah,
But to have
for
the right
sure.
people with you there to sustain it, to keep it, and even to celebrate, I think that's
Oh,
a
yeah.
really good word for our listeners today. And I mean, I think there's probably countless stories you could probably tell in that world, but I want to even shift gears a little bit more where, man, I know that I've had the privilege, and this is just based on our own relationship, and where I've seen you invest into to many people, um, both here locally or across the globe, coaching business, whatever it may be. But um, what drives you to do that? Why is that important to you? Within really what I see as many environments that you're in, for you to invest in other people the way that you do.
Good question. I think it has to start with two passages of scripture that are just so center to my life. One, Matthew 28. Jesus is giving the Great Commission, and he says, "Go make disciples of all nations." And
Hmm.
you can't make a disciple if you can't make a friend, right?
There it is.
So investing into people at a relational level is a basic foundation for making disciples.
Mm,
People have called it relational, ministry or relational discipleship. And so
good.
that one of the motives of my heart there, motivations is I want to obey Jesus. I want to make disciples. I want people
Mm,
to love the man who showed mercy to me and pulled me into a larger story,
mm,
and has just been so kind and gracious. And so that's for sure a huge motivation. I would say another scripture that would piggyback into that is Jesus in Matthew 9 is talking about, he's going through the villages. It says he goes through all the villages preaching, teaching, and healing. Um,
mhm,
and he looked at his disciples and he said to them, um, you know, uh, the harvest is great, but the
mm,
laborers, the workers are few. And he looked at the
mm,
crowds and he says, you see them? These here are like sheep without a shepherd. And I feel like if I could have a conversation with Jesus around that passage of scripture, it'd be one of the most fascinating conversations. But I
mm.
feel like one of the things he wants to do is raise up covering for the people, and he wants to raise up leaders that
Yeah.
can provide strength and provision and protection.
Mm,
And I think about the foster system. I think about the orphans around the world. I think about the homeless population. I think about single mothers. I
mm,
don't know how single homes. I don't know how they do it.
yeah.
And so when Jesus is talking about those crowds, he's talking about those people, whether they be in India or Indiana. It doesn't matter. He's saying, I love them, and my heart's breaking because there's nobody covering their life. There's nobody fighting for them.
Mm,
So, right alongside of that great commission passage, I want to be a part of that solution of raising up workers for the harvest.
mm.
So Jesus says, pray to the Lord of the harvest that he would send out laborers. So, multiply, as you know, I mean, this is what we do. This is why we do what we do.
That's right.
We invest into leaders so that they can go and provide covering, protection, provision, vision, to people in parts of the world that you and I could never actually thrive in.
Yes.
And so, and then I would say number three, kind of to wrap this part up, I would say I I just love leaders. I just love them, and
Mm.
I probably out of some of my own just need, my own desire for connection, um, and just that deep sense of, man, I want to be connected to like-minded men.
Yeah.
So I'm drawn to them, and I've just tried to position myself in a way that asking the question, how do I add value to Joseph today? Like if I'm sitting across from you and we're having a conversation, like what is it that I can do that can add value to you? Whether that's validating who you are, your identity in Christ, or maybe that's doing something very physical, like I need help with X, Y, or Z, whatever that could be, or
Mhm.
or helping you dream out loud and process about a step you want to take into the future. I love that stuff. Like
Yes.
that's why I
You
exist.
and I
I
love
love it.
that's
Yeah,
why
you
that's
do.
why
Yeah.
we connect, because we love those
So
things together. I think that's great. Just a peel behind the curtain of what drives you and what helps move you forward in a lot of different spaces. But we all know in leadership, leadership is hard and leadership is
yeah.
challenging.
Oh
And
yeah.
so we would love if you could even share a moment of um, maybe something that didn't go so well or didn't go near as well as you hoped to, maybe even a failure that you learned from.
Yeah.
And I'm putting you on the spot here, and that's okay. But
Totally
um,
good.
but let us learn from some of the failures and mistakes that you've kind of made along the way.
Oh, how long do you have? No,
Probably not
I
enough
think
time.
I've got a master's degree in this area. Um, one of the things that I've got two things that are coming to mind. One is when we lived in Peru, we took taxis for the first 10 months while we were there. Our children were 3 and 6, not too much younger than your oldest two.
Sure.
And so we were in taxis at least 2 to 4 times a day. And our oldest he'd literally, vomit every single time we got into a
Oh
taxi. It's
no.
just,
Oh no.
so we got into the habit of, we carried bags with
Yeah.
us. And but I remember in one of those taxi rides, I'm just talking with God, having a conversation internally, and it was almost like the Lord just said, there's two types of taxis. Okay. One taxi is gonna bump you all over the car on the way to the destination. The other, and you would always pray, man, give us a good taxi driver,
Yeah.
right? The other would get you there, same destination, pretty much same time frame, but you wouldn't be sick when you arrived. And I, I for the longest time, and I still have to really battle this. I am the taxi driver that can make the people in the car with me sick.
Ooh.
And as a leader, I've got to be very, very cautious not to be, because I'm a founder, I'm a visionary, I've got 10 ideas every day. And I've got to be cautious, and you know this about me to be true. I've got to be cautious that not every good idea is a God idea. And
Mm.
so I have certainly failed. One example, when we were planting the church there in Lima, we tried to plant a second church in a city called Manchai, which does now have a thriving church out of the church we planted there
It
now.
does.
But our first attempt, our first attempt was a failure,
Mm.
because I was trying to fit a square peg leader into a round hole and trying to make him something that he wasn't, because I wanted something so badly. I was so driven by outcomes. I essentially mobilized this guy into a place where he probably didn't really want to be,
Mm.
and maybe it was some manipulation on my part, probably. And I regret that. I regret,
Mm.
that for him. He's thriving. He's doing great now. We have a good relationship. I don't think there's bitterness there. I pray not. But again, that taxi principle, like too fast, too bumpy.
Mm.
You know, and just sometimes we want something for somebody else that they actually don't want
Don't
for
want.
themselves.
That's good wisdom.
And
Yeah.
so I'm trying to wait. So here's the second half of this answer. Waiting on God for his provision and not going, go to Abraham and Ishmael and that whole conversation. I don't
Hmm.
want to I don't want to birth a lot of Ishmaels in my life. I just want to do what
Yeah.
God wants to do, and say yes to what he wants to say yes to. I've discovered the hard way that it doesn't go well.
Mm.
It does, and many times God honors even our missteps, which is crazy that He
It's,
would do that.
I totally agree. Yeah.
He honors our missteps, but that's one story, one example of, and I would just encourage leaders who are like me, like we think there's an urgency, like if we don't get it done by this date, it's just, and I think um, I read a book a couple of years back called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by
Yeah.
John
Great
John
book.
Mark
John
Comer,
Mark
which you guys
Comer.
are
Yeah.
going through
Yeah. We're
in the
about to go
cohort
through
currently,
that in the
right?
core. Yeah.
It really slapped me in the face. Thank you, John Mark, and
Mhm.
we'll tag
He
you
has,
in the show notes.
he has a
But
tendency to do that.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I'm grateful because I think that was a Dallas Willard quote. He goes, "You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry if you're going to have a long obedience in the same direction."
Mhm.
And I try not to even use the word hurry, like getting my kids around like hurry up, we got to go, like
Uh,
that's taxi cab number one.
yeah.
And taxi cab number two, that you go into this guy's taxi cab and he's not in a hurry. There's good music playing. It smells nice,
Hmm.
and but we're going to get to the same destination.
Mm.
And I want to be the latter kind
Mm.
of cab driver, and I think we can do that. I just think we got to
Uh,
slow down, let God lead.
like God lead. Yeah.
I'm a follower of Christ before I'm a leader with Christ, right?
Ooh, there it is. There
So
it is.
that's I could go on and on
No, no.
about failure.
I think it'd be great, but
Yeah,
but for sake of time, we'll continue to move forward. But I mean, I don't think I've ever heard it worded or even the word picture of a taxi driver. But I think that's
yep,
something that we can all self-reflect and say, man, what kind of taxi driver,
yeah,
what kind of leader
yeah,
are we along the way? I think that's some really really good insight for us today. I'm really just going to ask that. Really, we just got a couple more things before we wrap up our
yeah,
time. As a visionary, you said it earlier. I've always got 10 ideas. If it's a
yes.
God thing, it's typically not a convenient thing. Like there's very much a thread that's there,
Yeah.
but what are you dreaming about? What is? And maybe this is too big of a can to open, but I would love to
Oh
know
goodness.
what where the Lord's just putting dreams in your heart and mind to wrestle with the Lord with.
Um, you know, this may not be the answer you're looking for, but this is
Yeah.
the honest answer. My 16-year-old junior in high school, we just went and visited Clemson, Georgia Tech. We're going to visit Oral Roberts University in Arkansas, and one of my dreams is to transition, and this is just right now current, is to transition my son into the next season of his life as a
Mm.
successful man. And if you know my son, he carries himself well with wisdom and excellence. And
He
but
does.
at the same time, the world is a crazy place. So I dream about how am I going to build this bridge for him over the next 18 months that he can safely cross on, and what part is it his to build, right?
Yeah.
Um, so those are dreams that we're dreaming about right now. And then my
Mm.
daughter's moving into high school,
Mm.
and I dream about her having this thriving experience in high school,
Mhm.
and then kind of professionally, um, and I could spend all day. My wife and I talk so much about that part of our dreams,
Mhm.
and then Multiply Global executive coaching. We have this gigantic dream of over the next decade partnering with 100 global leaders. So we are always on the lookout for uncommon leaders, uncommon globally minded leaders who want to be a multiplier of the kingdom. And we want to come alongside of these dreamers. And we want to provide, if they're an uncommon dreamer, we want to provide uncommon partnership. And from coaching to funding to relationships, some of those guys are going to start churches. Others are going to start businesses. Some of those ladies are going to raise children, and others are going to raise, and create children's homes in Pakistan and in India, and provide blankets in the mountains of India. And, that's exactly which is happening with Sam right now. So we're currently at 10 global leaders, but we're dreaming, at 1.5 speed. Like we're just saying, God, expedite this season of history that we're in. There's need, and time matters, and resources matter. And so we're dreaming about that, and dreaming about how do we connect all these, through the cohort, and all of these, what I call neighbors, these people within proximity of us. How do we take the neighbors and connect them with the nations? And how can we be a solution, and that Matthew 9 dream of God's heart, that there would be enough workers for the harvest? How do we connect the neighbors and the nations, whether that's their, raising up missionaries to go, or raising up funding to send? You know this, but one of the big focus of our ministry is discovering people who are already in the country. They're nationals. They're there. They know the language. They have the credentials. They have the relationships. But what they don't have typically is great partnerships.
It's true.
So, man, we want to position ourselves to become that for them. So we dream of that. Of course, all of it is for Jesus, and glorifying his name, and just really exposing the people around us, whether that be in our homes or in cohorts, or if we're on a trip around the world, to the heart of a good Father.
That's right.
Who's gracious and kind and loving and merciful, but he's also a judge and a king, and he's returning, and the time is near. And so
that's right. And I think that's a beautiful encapsulation of just where God's having you dream in this current season. I'll let you rapid fire this one. I'm going to steal it straight from John Acuff, where he loves to ask guests, and I want to ask you as well, what's the Mount Rushmore of books that you say everybody should read these books, these few books?
Oh my gosh.
This is a tough task for you. I don't know if you can do this one. I should have
Wish I could show you my library that is right over here.
At least give us two or three of, hey, everybody should read this book, and we'll link it in the show notes as well.
I would say, can I give a rapid fire answer here?
Okay, rapid fire.
I would say, if you're looking for deep heart transformation, and to that Proverbs 4:23, above all things, guard your heart, for it flow the issues of life. Like, my heart is everything. Go read everything John Eldredge wrote. John Eldredge, anything from Wild at Heart to Beautiful Outlaw to Waking the Dead to Resilient, his most recent. Fathered by God. Tap into the Resilient, the Pause app that they have. That's a fantastic resource. But let me give another one that's probably not going to be mentioned very often.
Okay, I'm ready.
Robert Coleman's Master Plan of Evangelism. If you're serious about wanting to be a multiplier of the kingdom, what Robert Coleman does, and I had the privilege of sitting in a seminar where he taught when he was 85, and he was just as passionate at 85 as I'm sure he was at 45. And he delivered that book in one talk, and it just was so impactful to me. And I've read that book several times. But he gives the blueprint of how Jesus went about changing the world. And it was very practical. It's very tangible in how he did this, he just selected a few and started investing in them. He associated with them. He consecrated them. He demonstrated the kingdom. He delegated jobs. He supervised their progress. And then he asked them to reproduce themselves. And so, and I think I'm missing one in there, but
that's why they got it. That's why they got to read it.
That's why they got to go read it. But that book is a fantastic resource for anybody that really wants to be a multiplier of the kingdom. And one of the quotes he uses in that book is, we must decide where we want our ministry to count, in the popularity of today, which will cause you to build a big platform with your name all over it, or whether we want to invest ourselves into a few people who will carry on our ministry after we're gone.
After we're gone. Yes. One of my favorite parts of the
And
book.
that may not show up for a decade or 2 or 3, but when Jesus' ministry is done Jesus' way, 2,000 years later, here we are.
Amen.
And so I think Robert Coleman captures that well.
That's excellent. I think those are two great choices for us to go and resource. I say choices. One was every book by one author.
Every
I don't know if that counts, but that's okay. That's okay. Well, Josh, I think that's all the time that we're going to have for today. In the show notes, we're going to connect a couple different ways that they can stay connected with you and what you're doing, and with what Multiply Global is doing as well. But Josh, as in the most personal way, as a friend, as somebody that I enjoy doing ministry alongside of, thank you for your time. Thank you for dreaming big and continuing to pursue the kingdom in everything that you do. And so, hey, once again, this is the first podcast. This is the Multipliers Leadership Podcast. So thanks for joining, and we'll be back with you soon. And we can't wait to see what God's going to do in and through this. So, hey, we'll see you guys soon. See you guys.
Thank you. Yeah.